Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar by the Department of Chemical Engineering and Biotechnology. In this webinar today, we'll be having one of our alumni join us to talk about her career since she graduated from the department. We're just going to give it a minute or so while we wait for all the attendees to join. So bear with us and we'll make a start shortly. Okay, it looks like we've got a stable number of attendees joined now. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cameron Yunus. I'm one of the academic members of staff at the Department of Chemical Engineering and Biotechnology here at the University of Cambridge. I'm joined here today with one of my very good colleague and sort of, I'd say, an old friend from the department. So Rachel Cook studied at the Department of Chemical Engineering and Biotechnology a number of years ago, and once she finished her undergraduate studies, she stayed on to do a PhD for 3 years at the department. And after finishing her PhD, she graduated and moved on to a range of different sorts of careers in industry. And today's webinar is all about trying to give you as an audience some perspective of the opportunities you can have after doing an undergraduate degree in chemical engineering and biotechnology. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to hand over to Rachel, who hopefully will be giving us an insightful talk about her career pathways.
Thanks, Cam. So what I really want to talk to you today is about all the different possibilities you can have in your career, because as you're starting out and trying to imagine what your career could look like, it's really difficult. And the truth is, my career has far exceeded and been completely different to any expectation that I might have had at the time. And really the way I see a career, it's a series of decisions. So it's a series of decisions about what you're going to do. And so all those different choices make a career in its entirety. So the first thing is to start and think about inside yourself, what do you want to do with your life? Why do you want to do it? So Simon Sinek, who I'm very pleased to say I actually got to meet once in Florida, as you can see from the photo. He wrote this book, Start With Why. You can watch the TED Talk for free, which says a very similar thing. But why are you looking here today, thinking about studying chemical engineering and biotechnology at Cambridge? For me, my why is I grew up in the northeast of England, and this is a photograph of Teesside. And this is what I used to see driving home at night or from school in the dark. And this to me looked like a very exciting place to work. It's the petrochemicals industry. Now, of course, by the time I graduated, that's not where I ended up working. But for me, that seemed like an exciting, challenging place to work. And it looked like to me a great big playground. So that's why I started to study chemical engineering. Of course, we can say, yes, I'm good at chemistry, physics, maths, and obviously biology if you want to do biotechnology. But also, I thought that this would be an interesting place to work because it was very alien to anything I'd come across before. So I went to Cambridge, I studied chemical engineering, and then during my time at Cambridge, I had various summer jobs or internships, I guess you could call them. So one was with ICI, which no longer exists as a company. But I think it starts to tell you that the companies you think are around right now, they're not going to be the ones that are around in 20, 30 years time, or even 10 years time. So it's very important that you think more broadly and expect there will be change. I did a summer job with ExxonMobil on an oil refinery down near Southampton. So again, I was quite into the oil industry, the large oil refineries and petrochemical plants still. And then my PhD was sponsored by Schlumberger, who are an oil field services company. So my PhD had a little bit to do with fracking, which has been in the news a lot. And then I had a fabulous time with Shell, actually, still with the oil companies. and they took me to the south of Spain for a couple of weeks work experience, which left a big impression of me. But then one of the great things about chemical engineering and biotechnology is they can lead you to a whole host of different places. So it's all about making things on the large scale. And so I looked at Unilever, and I also looked at P&G, Procter & Gamble. I looked at Cadbury, I looked at Mars. So there were all these different choices of places to work. And in the end, I actually chose Cadbury to start my career. So I'd gone in thinking I wanted to work in the oil industry, making plastics at a large scale. And I came out realizing I love chocolate. And there are many reasons why Cadbury is a great place to work. I mean, the first is if you get a spill, it's edible. It's not going to be corrosive or cause your eyes to water. So that for me was really good. And then Cadbury, and this is obviously about 20 years ago before it is now Mondelez, it was a Quaker company, and it had this culture and values that I very much like, the factory in a garden. And you need to weigh up these different things. So the geographic locations, if you're in the food business, then the locations are generally closer to the customer, depending on the shelf life of the food. Whereas obviously in the oil industry, the locations are where the oil is. And you get paid a bit more perhaps to be there. But you know, you've traded that off by living maybe further away from home or further away from where you'd like to be. So your career is always going to be a choice. How much money do you want based on geographic locations? Are you prepared to many hours you prepared to work for that extra remuneration? Or would you rather have a less stressful job? And do you want that challenge? Do you want to drive a change in society? There's many things to consider. But I like chocolate, and that was my main consideration. And I liked the people I met at Cadbury. So my very first job was down in Somerset in the UK. And I was what's called a SAP implementation manager. So SAP is a computer system that runs the company. And for me, what I did was I joined a graduate scheme. So I think that's one of the great things about being at a university like Cambridge, is many companies come to try and attract you to apply, and they put you on a graduate scheme, which is a series of different jobs over a couple of years, so you can get a broad experience of what it's like in the world of work and build up your knowledge before deciding where you're going to end up. So after a few months here, I actually decided I really would like to go and live abroad. That's something that was inside me. I thought it would be interesting, and I was young, I had no ties. So I said to my mentor, can you get me a job abroad? And what he did was he sent me to Dublin. Now, that was actually a great thing. He didn't have many options in front of him. Dublin was one of them, and it was only because I showed an interest that I went to Dublin. And Dublin is the perfect place to start your career abroad, because it is abroad. There's different currencies, different laws, slightly different vocabulary. There's different insurance, there's different bank accounts, and yet you can communicate with everybody in English. So that for me was a good sort of starter trip abroad. I've since lived abroad a couple more times. And in fact, right now I'm speaking to you from Luxembourg. So I started off with this great product called flake praline. Sadly, you can no longer buy it, but we started out, we commissioned the line. We made the very first chocolate bars in this Cadbury factory in Dublin. Then I went back to the UK, to Birmingham, to Bourneville, the heart of chocolate, and started to work on other new products. So actually, this was a pretty cool job. I'm getting to make new products, new chocolate products, and figure out the engineering behind how you make them. And this is another product called Cadbury Dairy Milk with Cream Egg. Again, sadly not available, but it was really interesting. We're making a white syrup to go in here. And actually, you know, the reason that's white is due to the crystals in it. And there's some really, really great chemical engineering in there. And then as you can see on the picture, there's white and yellow, right? And then there's this great big discussion as to do you put the yellow in first and then the white, or the white and the yellow? And does it all run and mix before the customer gets to eat it anyway? So there's some really good chemical engineering in all of this. And I really enjoyed the product and the project, although even after a couple of years, it's sadly no longer available. And then one of the things the graduate programs encourage you to do is to try slightly different jobs. So although I'm a chemical engineer, I was in manufacturing, And I'd obviously done some jobs that really involved using not only my degree, but also my PhD. They encourage you to try something slightly different to build that commercial experience. And so I went into being a buyer, or what's often called procurement, and I bought all the fruit and nuts for the UK and Ireland for Cadbury, which was a really interesting job. I got a lot of training. I learned negotiation skills. I learned how to calculate how much a product should cost. And it gave me lots of skills that were actually very valuable in my future career. I had slightly nervous moments when our hazelnut paste supplier suddenly said, they were going to stop selling hazelnut paste, had to find a replacement to keep roses going. And we kept getting replacements shipped, making them up into samples and tasting them, and they tasted different. And that's all to do with how the hazelnuts were roasted before they made this paste. So I had some very nerve-wracking moments. And I think what I learned was that I needed to ask for help when I got stuck. So I worked as a buyer, bought the fruits and nuts. We also at that time made all the sweets for Marks and Spencer's, so things like freeze-dried strawberries and so on. And they were all very nice and interesting. But I was already beginning to shape my next career decision. And I think this is the thing I always say to people: your career matters to you more than it matters to anybody else. So if you don't think about what you want to do next, don't expect someone else to go, actually, you'd be brilliant for this job. You need to help people understand that. And one of the best ways to do that is to get a mentor. And so I had a mentor from my first factory I'd worked in. And I said to him, look, I've worked in Dublin, but actually I'd like to work further abroad and work on a big project. And he said, well, the biggest project that Cadbury were doing right then was building a new factory in Poland. And so with his encouragement, I sent an email directly to the director of the project saying, love to come and work on it. And the rest, as they say, is history. But timing is also important. So the project, although it had been announced, they weren't yet at the right stage to hire someone like me at my level. But I found another job in Cadbury that kept me going, and I made Maynard's Wine Gums Lights. And this is a picture of what we did. So we took the glucose syrup and we replaced it, or half of it, with polyols, which are sweeteners that don't have any calories, which is how we got to half the sugar with the same actually really great taste. And that was, again, a really interesting chemical engineering project, because you're replacing a hot liquid, with a cold powder. And there were lots of challenges with that. The biggest challenge, though, was completely unexpected. Soon after the product launched in the shops, there was some really big floods in Sheffield where it was made. And the factory flooded. We lost a lot of product. The factory shut for a while. The product went off sale in the supermarkets. And we had to focus on the basics, on the wine gums and the licorice all sorts and the jelly babies, rather than these low sugar projects. And they never, ever came back. But nothing to do with the product itself. And this is just an example of how actually wine gums are made, because I certainly didn't realize this, but this is actually a starch bed. So you make a bed of starch, you then print into the starch the shapes, and then you deposit all the different colors and flavors across there, and then you let them dry. And because they're drying in the starch, there's a water transfer from the sweets to the starch. So again, really good chemical engineering, always involved. But as you said, I wanted to go and work on the biggest project that Cadbury were doing globally, I think, certainly in Europe at the time. And that's when I emailed this director saying, I'd like to work on your project. And even though I wasn't immediately said yes, within a year, I was actually working on this project, which is in Poland. So I went and lived in Poland in a city called Wrocław for 3 years. I learned to speak Polish, although I didn't need to for my work, I did for my social life, I think. And this is the first factory that we built. This is a chewing gum factory. And again, it's just a nice textbook example of how you set something up. You've got inbound at this end, and then you've got ingredients processing all the way through to making the actual chewing gum, to packaging the chewing gum, and then outbound here. And this is actually on an old Soviet era airfield, and so there's actually airplanes still occasionally landing on there. So it's quite an exciting adventure. And I learned so much here, starting to move away from chemical engineering actually into construction and mechanical engineering for the packaging, and also into how you commission and start up a factory and how you hire all these people and train them and then start actually producing saleable product. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the team spirit, the people I worked with, and the real sense of achievement when you start to actually make things. And this is actually one of the installations that I designed. It's carrying, again, a large sack of these polyols that we saw before, these sugar-free sweeteners, not only in those wine gums, but also in sugar-free chewing gum. And this is another thing I was responsible for during the construction phase. So I was managing many contractors, which is some lifts and for something called chewing gum base. And then here we have a little bit more. This is a picture of the very first batch of Tropical Twist ever made in Poland. And on the top left here, this is the team that did it. You can see me on the end, dressed in white. And then you can see a truly international team. We were Dutch, we were Polish, we were English, we were Chilean. My boss was Argentinian, really international team. But you can see something there, right? I'm wearing white shoes, white trousers, a white blouse, and a hairnet. And that was something I didn't realize when I took my job at Cadbury, was that every day I would have to be dressed in white. But that's what you do because you have to be very clean, and any dirt needs to be immediately visible so that you don't contaminate the product. So throughout my career, I've veered towards my current role where I don't have to wear white. Should also say you allowed no nail varnish, limited makeup, and no jewelry, because obviously the jewelry could fall in the product, which isn't actually an issue anymore. So that was something I didn't expect, but you know, the ends justified the means, really, although I did get quite bad split ends. And then this is how you make chewing gum, which is massive long polymers. And really what you do is you mix them all up and then you roll them into these slabs. And then you actually need to condition it and let all the polymer chains relax again before you package it. So more great chemical engineering, more stuff related actually to my PhD, even though I didn't know it at the time when I did my PhD. And then this is this factory we were in just here. And now we've got a slightly different shot. So this factory is now operating, and Cadbury decided to actually build a chocolate factory next door. So true building a brand new chocolate factory, and you can start to see the actual construction here, which is also really interesting. And I had the opportunity to stay on in Poland, so it only took that project was only 1.5 years. I stayed on for another 1.5 years, getting this factory up and running. And here we made such things as Fry's Turkish Delight, Curly Whirlies, and Double Decker here, and Picnic. So many great products that, you know, I grew up with loving, and honestly I got to eat so much. I put on a lot of weight and was quite sick, but I love the products. I would still eat them, and they taste completely different when they're fresh. You know, before the toffee has really hardened, they're really very nice, and it's a different experience. So one of the benefits of the job, but also some really good engineering and how the wagglers waggle and make curly whirlies and so on. And then double deckers are fascinating because this nougat on top has got whipped air in it. So the density, you have to make it really consistent, because if you get too much air in it, it's too big, or too little, it's not big enough. And then it doesn't go through the packing machines, which are expecting a bar that's exactly the right size. So there's many challenges because it has to be the right size and weight. And then I said to myself, this is great. I've been 3 years in Poland. I speak Polish. I've had some international experience. Where are all my friends, and where do I want to live? And I said I want to live in London. And the best job working for Cadbury in London was this product development manager, where I worked at the interface of marketing and supply chain, trying to tell marketing, you know, what we could make using the equipment we have, and trying to help supply chain and the factories turn marketing's ideas into realities. So for various reasons, I decided I wanted to live in London, and I think that was a great decision. I ended up spending 7 years in London altogether, and I did this very interesting job where we made various different packaging. We made something called Guzzle Puzzle, which doesn't exist anymore, but if you combine different flavors, I think that's strawberry and lime, the sweets on their own taste of strawberry or lime, you combine them together, they taste of Coca-Cola. I worked across all these different brands such as Hall's, Claire's Velvets, the Natural Confectionery Company, and again back to Bassett's and Maynard's. And one of the things that I guess is luck, it was luck, is I was working for Cadbury's in London when we were an Olympic sponsor, so in London 2012. And as a result of that, I got to meet gold medalists in the cycling here. I got to go on the Olympic Park and sell Cadbury product as a volunteer. And I got behind the scenes, access all areas passed for the Paralympics. So these are the bits of your career I can't really put in my CV. I can put in my CV, worked with the Olympic Games to run promotions, so prizes, giving away tickets and so on. But you can't actually put, had this great experience meeting all these athletes and being part of the Olympics, which is something that you don't get again. So after all of that, I want to sort of talked about having a purpose as well. So I'll tell you what I did after that, but this is another sort of side career I had during my entire time at Cadbury, which is really outreach work with students and pupils, bringing them into the factory to see chocolate being made and helping them understand how engineering is so important in the processing of all the food that we eat. And so maybe there's various things on here that I think I want to highlight. One of them is in the bottom left, sort of working with local schools, in particular this school in Birmingham, to help them. We actually did a product where we put boxes of chocolate on a treadmill to see how they would break, which was sort of simulating our conveyor system, roughly. I got various opportunities through the Institution of Chemical Engineers at the IChemE, not only to receive awards, such as Young Engineer of the Year, but also later on in my life, here's a photo of me back at Cambridge presenting awards, which I think is the full circle. I also got the opportunity, I think in this bottom picture here, to talk at the party political conferences about the importance of engineering to the economy, and then various other awards from Cadbury, and here's one from Amazon, really to sort of raise the profile of engineering. And that's probably why I'm here talking to you today, because this is something I really believe in. I think it's very, very important. This photo in the middle where I'm in green, we're opening a hands-on science center that I'm a director of. So this is an example of how you can follow your passion or your hobby whilst at the same time driving your career. But then I was ready for my first career change. So I worked for Cadbury for nearly 10 years. And during that time, I'd lived in Ireland, lived in Poland. Cadbury had been bought by Kraft and had been renamed Mondelez. And when I joined Cadbury, I really thought I was going to work there for my entire life. And I think this is the change that we start to see. So when I graduated, I really wanted to pick one company forever. And now you start to see that in your career, this isn't really possible. Maybe in my parents' age it was, but now many people are changing companies. And I have to admit, this was due to luck. This was due to my LinkedIn profile. I got contacted by SAB Miller, South African Breweries Miller, and they said, hey, we've got this job. Do you know anyone who would be interested? And I read it and I was like, yeah, I'm interested. At the same time, I had a list of 20 companies that were top in food and drink that I thought I might want to work with in the future. And I planned mentally to set aside a Sunday afternoon to research them on the internet and look at their jobs pages to see if there are any jobs. But I was always too busy. And that's why I kind of say my advice to you is make time for planning your career, because if you don't, no one else will. But as it happened, if you don't have time to do that, the second best thing is to have a really good LinkedIn profile, connect with lots of people, and then people will come to you with jobs. So SAB Miller was the world's second largest brewer by volume. Obviously, Miller Genuine Draft is one of its products, but if you're in the UK or Italy, Peroni, Tischia in Poland, Grolsch in the Netherlands, Coors in America, and then some more premium projects such as Sylvanas in Belgium. And I got a slightly different job with them. I started doing lean manufacturing or operational excellence. And what was really important for SABMiller when they hired me was that they hired someone with a broad range of manufacturing and engineering experience, which I'd got through my graduate scheme and then subsequent roles. And then also the fact that I was actually a chartered engineer. And actually by that stage, I was a fellow of the Institution of Chemical Engineers. So it was quite important for them to have that. And part of that was doing the degree at Cambridge, let me become a student member and then eventually a fellow of the ICME. So there are times when I think it's important that the jobs you choose are ones that you'll enjoy, because it's the way the life seems to work to me is you do a job and then you get more jobs that are similar. So if you're doing a job that you enjoy, the next job you get will be similar and you'll also enjoy it. Whereas if you take a job that you don't really enjoy because you think it will get you somewhere that you will enjoy, watch out that you won't get so disheartened doing the bit you don't enjoy that you don't get there. But I joined SABMiller and I got to do some fabulous things. I was there for 4 years. So this photo on the left, this is in Cape Town. So SABMiller was originally a South African company, although it was listed on the London Stock Exchange. And on the left, this is the oldest brewery in Africa. That's Table Mountain in the background. And I'm there on the visit to audit them, really, and to say how good they are at running their brewing processes. And then on the right, this is my first trip ever to America, business class on expenses. And this is the Fort Worth Miller Brewery in Texas. And a week after I took that photo, I met Simon Sinek in Florida. So I think for me, it was important to have a career that let me see the world. And I was recently in America. So 2 weeks ago, I was in Chicago and Nashville. And I reflected to myself, I've been all over America, Seattle, Miami, Dallas, California, several times in LA, Boston. And I've had long weekends in all of these places, and I've never once paid for a flight there. And I've also had long extended holidays in South Africa, in Cape Town, and Johannesburg, doing Durban. And again, I've managed to have all the flights paid for me. So there's a little bit about making your career work for you and making those choices. This is a little bit of engineering to help you. I was doing some work. What we were really talking about, world-class manufacturing, Lean Six Sigma, all this great stuff that we took from Toyota in Japan, about how to manage a production line and how to problem solve. And then this brewery here is Timisoarenia, which is in Romania, which is actually one of our best breweries. So not only did I travel globally to Australia, Africa and America, but I also went to places like Romania and Hungary in Europe. And again, something here's a photos of insides of the brewery. I mean, brewing is pure chemical, biotechnology and chemical engineering. It's a very old process, but we're continually getting better and better at it. And then one of the highlights still, so, my highlight at Cadbury was probably London 2012. My highlight at SABMiller was this trip to Africa here in the company jet. I've never flown in a private jet since or before, but this is the jet in Lagos airport. This is the sun setting, which is why these tanks look pink. It's not rust, it's the sunset. And this is the brewery roof in Accra in Ghana. And this is a brewery on the banks of the River Niger. And for those of you that have not been to Africa and had the chance to see its production facilities, this is the inside of the brewery in Nigeria. And it is clean, it is tidy, it's working very well. And honestly, it's working better than many breweries in what we would call more developed areas of the world. So it completely changed my perhaps bad preconceptions of the country. Nigeria is actually a very, very good brewing country, high standards of safety, with safety shoes and a hard hat and a high vis, very clean and tidy production. And it was really interesting to go and see them actually extend this brewery and make it larger. So I flew around Africa having these different experiences. And that's really the only times I've been to Africa, like the only times I've been to America, have been on work. And then SAB Miller was the world's second largest brewer. It got bought by the world's largest brewer. And this is also something I didn't realize when I started my career, is that nothing lasts forever. And so I'd worked for two companies, both of which had been over 100 years old. And actually both of them had been bought and gone off the stock exchange. So SAB Miller was bought by Anheuser-Busch InBev, who was in the press quite a lot at the time, as was the purchase of Cadbury. And so again, through LinkedIn, I was contacted by Amazon. And Amazon, they're not a typical company for hiring chemical engineers. And yet there are an awful lot of us here, I have to say. And why Amazon? So I wanted to work for a company that was growing in Europe. I also, if you think, I'd been working on like the brewery of the future, what if the Internet of Things, Industry 4.0, all these sort of words about how we're incorporating all these advances in digitization and technology into our manufacturing processes. And I thought Amazon would be a great place to learn about all these things and to really changing our world, particularly during the last few years. So here are just some photos of me in our site in Germany, in Hamburg, and then there's some photos of us in Manchester, and this is just part of my team. And then during my time at Amazon, I should stop here and say the reason Amazon hired me was because they were growing in Europe. They were opening new warehouses. And I had experience of opening new factories in countries outside of the UK. So the fact that I had this experience that I'd had from Cadbury, Amazon saw that relevant to what they were doing and wanted to hire me into their operations engineering team, which is the team that built new warehouses across Europe. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then the reliability and maintenance team said, actually, you know, all these things you know about lean manufacturing, operational excellence, they'd be really good in our team. So why don't you come and work here? And I've been now in the reliability maintenance team for 2.5 years. And a couple of months ago, they promoted me to a director. And so that is my career at Amazon and my career to date. And I had no idea when I studied chemical engineering and biotechnology that I would end up in reliability engineering, which is actually a combination of mechanical engineering and software engineering. In Amazon, I live in Luxembourg. I've lived in Luxembourg for 5 years now. I've just applied for dual British Luxembourgish nationality. If you'd asked me when I was just about to go to university that I would be taking on another nationality, that you know, I have Gcse French and German, but as an adult I would learn 2 languages and they would be Polish and Luxembourgish. It's crazy. You would never imagine this, and I would never imagine I'd end up in reliability engineering. But what it goes to show is what you learn, the process uses you learn, and the way you learned how to think, that's what's important. So learning how to tackle big problems, learning how to think about solutions, that really is completely transferable. And so this is not something I would have predicted as my career. And that's why I want to share with you is that the possibilities are endless and they're huge. And the most important thing is to make sure you're having fun along the way, right? That's means that you'll continue to have fun, because we're all going to work hard. Exams, then work. It is hard, right? Amazon it says make history. You know, there are a lot of things we've done for the first time and will continue to do. But it's important to have fun and to surround yourself with people that you will have fun with. And then, so my career has been very much chemical engineering. I just wanted to say a few words about biotechnology and the places it can take you as well, which is actually in chemical engineering as well, which is why the two are together in the department. So there's a whole load of stuff we've not talked about to do with medicine, and to do with vaccines is actually a really interesting one and very topical lately. And many of my former colleagues at Cambridge have worked very hard in this area. So that's another more complicated product than chocolate for sure. Though what's really interesting is that when we were starting up the chewing gum factory, we took a lot of the best practices from the pharmaceutical industry as to how to start up new production lines. Agriculture is huge as a chemical engineer, particularly when I was in beer, because obviously growing the wheat, the barley, the hops, making sure all those products are right. And there's a lot of advances there, particularly with the latest technology. Environmental biotechnology, there's a sustainability, energy production, there's so much there that's very, well, I want to say topical, but it's topical because it's going to be the careers of the future. And then forensics is super interesting. I do love a good murder mystery, but I'm a little bit too squeamish to either to do forensic biotechnology or to be a medical doctor. So those are sorts of things that actually influence my career, as well as you know, my love of chocolate. So that's the end of me talking to you. I think I talked for over half an hour, so apologies. I hope I kept you interested. And I see there's some questions. So Cam, do you want to what's been happening?
Thank you, Rachel, for that really interesting talk. I'm definitely jealous of all the places you visited. So there are some questions here on the Q&A. And sorry, at the beginning of the webinar, I was supposed to announce this, that if you have questions that you would like to ask, please do post them on the Q&A feature on Zoom. I'm going to start off by sort of talking through some of the questions that have been posted here. One question's come up from somebody which says, is a degree in chemical engineering sufficient to apply to work as a petroleum engineer, or do you need to have a degree in petroleum engineering?
I can actually answer this one because I was a student member of the Petroleum Institute, which is weird, hey? A chemical engineering degree is sufficient, for sure. But I might even ask you, you know, where is petroleum engineering going in the future? Do we see petrol as really a good career choice? I know it's super interesting, and the geology as well, as the chemical engineering. It's a fascinating area, and every time I go anywhere, I start to look at you know, the oil production and the rock types. But I would say that during my career, a lot of my colleagues who went into the petroleum industry, and later friends, so people not from Cambridge in the petroleum industry, chemical engineers, they've gone through some really tough times. When it's booming, it's fabulous. There's money, there's excitement, there's new projects. But when it's a crisis, and when we're, you know, moving towards electric cars and more environmentally friendly production, you know, people are taking early retirement, they're getting reduced sizes of teams and stuff. So my biggest piece of advice to anybody is it's really fun to work for a company that's profitable and growing. So if you think you can find that in the petroleum industry, and actually there are some if you look in the right places, then great. But there's nothing more miserable than working for a company that's cutting back on its headcount, cutting back on expenditure. So it cuts back on travel, it cuts back on training. So that's why I like Amazon.
Okay, there's another question here, which I think we can try and answer this more generically. The question is, what grades did you get in your GCSEs and A levels, and what subjects did you do?
Okay, so yeah, in my GCSEs, I got straight A stars. I did triple science, so physics, chemistry, biology, and then obviously maths, English lit, English language, and I thought I said French and German. I did AS level electronics with my GCSEs as well. And then for my A levels, I'm so old, they didn't have A stars at A level when I did my A levels. But I got 5 A's in physics, chemistry, maths, further maths, and general studies. And I also did S levels, which are the steps, and I got a 1 and an S, which is the scholarship grade. But I'm going to tell you something. This is the first time in like 20 years I've ever had to say my grades. Nobody cares. Nobody even cares that I got a first class degree, let alone a stars first. Nobody cares about any of this when you get, as soon as you get into industry, nobody cares about which university you went to, what degree you've got, what your grades were at GCSE or A level. All they are is a stepping stone to the next part. So that's what I would say.
I mean, for now, if you were thinking of applying to Cambridge, one of the things that is your A levels, which is quite important now. So anyone interested in applying for chemical engineering and biotechnology at the university, we really encourage students to take up maths and chemistry A level, and the entry requirements are 2 A stars and an A. So there is quite tough, but I mean there is no entry requirements for GCSEs. But if people are wanting to find out more about admissions and entry requirements and things like this, there's lots of resources available on the university website and on the department website as well. Okay, another question. Did you have work experience before you applied to Cambridge?
I had had 2 weeks of work experience. I'd spent 1 week in a laboratory that was testing plastics at ICI. And I'd spent 1 week organized by the school in Pilkington Microelectronics. And I'm going to be honest, the thing I learned the most in that week was how to play Minesweeper, which for those of you who don't know, is a computer game. But they were also, actually, it was quite interesting. I do remember they were doing a programmable chip. So rather than a computer chip being fixed, that you could program it to do different stuff. And I programmed it to be a clock, which crashed when it got to 24 hours. But it was good fun for the start, right? And they said, yeah, when they did that the first time, they had the same problem. So yeah, I did, but I didn't do paid work experience. It was 1 week. It was unpaid, and I think it was like someone at the school's father who worked at the company set it up. But I don't think it made any difference to me getting into Cambridge. What people, and I guess you could probably do another session on Cambridge interviews, but they're really interested in how you think, how you take a complex problem that you've never come across before and break it down and try and solve it. And that's really what you should focus on, for sure.
Yeah, it's all about demonstrating your passion for the subject, really what people are looking for when you apply to the university. And what Rachel has just said is spot on. We are really interested in how you think, and can you think out of the box? Are you an independent thinker? Can you work through problems which you've not come across before, but able to think through what could be a possible answer for that? Those are the sorts of things we're assessing when we're doing undergraduate admissions interviews. Another question's come up. This is in the chat actually. Would you be put at a disadvantage if you don't do A-level physics when applying and when doing the degree in chemical engineering? Ooh, that's, I mean,
it's a tough one. So the weird thing about the Cambridge Tripos is in the first year, you actually do natural sciences before you do chemical engineering. And I actually chose chemistry, physics, and material science, right? So I actually did the first year of a physics degree. I think you need to ask why you didn't do A-level physics, right? If it was just because you couldn't because of the way your school was structured, I don't think there's a huge disadvantage as long as you've got the mechanical component. If you've done further maths mechanical, it's the same as A-level physics, right? But you do need to be able to cope with that stuff, no matter which A-level you cover the same material in, right, Cam?
Yeah. I mean, just to add to what Rachel said, it's what is fundamental is we're looking for people who've done maths and chemistry A-level, and there is an opportunity to pick up on other core science subjects while you're doing your degree. So we recognize that students won't have, there'll be many students who wouldn't have covered some core concepts in physics. And so a part of the first year of your undergraduate is to try and get everyone on the same page. Since Rachel's finished, since you finished your degree, the university has been looking at moving on with the undergraduate course. And this year, we're actually launching our first, our undergraduate course, which is going to be a direct entry now. So no longer people will be doing first year natural sciences or engineering. So applicants applying this October will be applying directly into chemical engineering. And one of the things we do in the first year is do all the fundamental sciences with them, which you would do if you were doing first year NATSCI. So very similar to that. Another question, how would the career of someone who did material science at uni differ? Oh, that's a difficult one. And I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, I don't know, Rachel, jump in if there's anything you can add to this. I think, you know, you can go on to a whole range of careers after you've done your degree. One of the things I do when I talk to school kids is let's talk about, you know, what kind of careers you can have if you did a degree in theology. And it's very, very diverse. What university does is gives you an opportunity to develop your skill sets, to become a competitive person once gone into industry. So, you know, you shouldn't worry about too much about what degree will get you into what kind of career. Think about the subject that you're passionate about, because at the end of the day, you're going to spend 3 or 4 years studying that at university. And then the opportunities will be there once you graduate.
Well, I'm going to be a bit more controversial and less on the fence than you, right? The bit that's important for me is to be an engineer. So yes, a chemical engineer is great, a biochemical engineer, a mechanical engineer, whatever, but it's that engineer, right? Which is about actually inventing, because ingenuity, and then doing stuff on a large scale. So there's a whole group of us that identify as engineers, whether you're industrial, process, chemical, whatever, is kind of second. If you're a material scientist, then it can be a little bit more theoretical and a little bit less practical, right? There is obviously a huge intersection, right? So you can have exactly the same career, but on the edges, you start to go in different ways. Yeah. And engineering is all about how you think, right? Whereas in material science is a bit more understanding the different material properties.
Yeah, that's a good way of summarizing it. Yeah. Another question. What extracurricular activities would you recommend students interested in engineering to do to develop their skills, build their application?
I would just recommend you do some extracurricular activities. Yeah. I always pre-university, I guess I did do some sport. I didn't do too much extracurricular, but the best piece of advice my father ever gave me when I was at university was he said, you've got to do something, right? Because what happens when you've got your degree is you go and interview for all these companies and everybody's got a first class degree. So what's going to make you different? And he scared me so much that I immediately volunteered to be on the staff student consultative committee at Cambridge. And because he'd had this conversation with me maybe 2 days before they asked for volunteers, my hand was the first up, so I got voted in. So it's just important to do something, have a leadership role if possible, or at least a coordinating role, so that you can demonstrate you've got some of these skills. But honestly, just do something you enjoy. If it's organizing a book club, brilliant, right? But you know, if it's playing sport and organizing a team and thinking different tactics, that also works, right? Just pick something that you're interested in. Life's too short.
Yeah, one of the things that that we always recommend students is not to think about extracurricular activities, but think about what this is the new way of terminology, which is supercurricular activities. Is really think about types of things you can do that help you develop your understanding around your subject interest. So there's lots of resources online, you know, for example, TED Talks. It's always good to go and read around your subject area, find out what's happening more broadly around that subject area. And what that actually does is help you develop your skill sets and seeing how what you're learning so far at school in a much more broader context as well. And that's really what you get tested at when you come for a Cambridge interview. So yeah, so lots of resources available around supercurricular activities on the university website. So please do Google that and explore that. And that will give you lots of resources that you can work through and lots of different ideas of what you can do. Another question's come up. What university degree can lead to a career in renewable energy industry? Oh, that's an easy one. Yeah. What do you think, Rachel?
Chemical engineering. Chemical engineering and biotechnology.
Exactly, chemical engineering and biotechnology.
But let's be honest, if you're going to build a wind turbine, then you probably want mechanical engineering, right? It depends where you're going to go. you know, solar again could even be material science for photovoltaics. But yeah, I think there's a whole coalescence of expertise that is needed.
I mean, when it comes to renewable energy, the biggest problem, the biggest challenges is understanding what would be the next way of delivering energy to society. And there's lots of ways of approaching it. I mean, right now, people are looking at moving towards electrifying everything. So buy electric cars and things like this. But the problem still lies in how do you produce that electricity? So there's a big problem there. And yeah, chemical engineering as a discipline plays a huge role in the future in trying to find these solutions and providing society with the ever-growing need for energy that they have. Yeah.
So Cam, I'm just looking at the Q&A box. We've actually got 15 questions still to answer. And
yeah.
Not so long. So shall we, do you want to take what is cleaning through bioremediation? Or do you want me to take that?
You want to take that one?
If you know the answer, you can go. I'm going to make an educated guess.
I mean, bioremediation is all about seeing how you can use biological processes to clean up industrial waste. So there's a lot of work going in the industry where they're looking at things like algae, cyanobacteria, other forms of bacteria that can be used for kind of cleaning up industrial waste and removing these harmful sort of components within any industrial waste. So one example of bioremediation is looking at how industrial waste can be treated with things like bioreactors and stuff like that. Another question, how easy is it to switch between chemical engineering and biomedical engineering? Oh, that's...
At Cambridge, it's quite easy to switch degrees. Should we leave it at that?
Yeah, yes.
Other universities may differ.
Yeah. What is the difference between biotechnology and biochemistry in terms of the course at the university? How much do the career paths differ from one another? Oh, that's a tricky one. I think biochemistry is much more a sort of fundamentals in biology and cell biology and things like this, where biotechnology is a much more of an applied subject where you're seeing how biological systems can be applied in different applications. And that would be one way of summarizing it, would you say?
Yeah, I think that leads quite nicely on to the next question, right? So if you're talking about biomedical engineering or chemical engineering, so engineering is all about chemical engineers making stuff at the large scale. So if you want to make the vaccine at a large enough scale repeatedly to give to everybody, then you need chemical engineering. But if you want to work on finessing the individual one in the in the lab, then there's a different degree. So
yeah,
it's where you want to be.
So, and the other one question here, is it easy to switch between different disciplines within biotechnology and chemical engineering? If you're applying to Cambridge, that is, the degree is chemical engineering and biotechnology. We recognize that chemical engineering is a very diverse discipline, and this is why the course has been structured this way, which actually looks at how you can look at bioprocesses on an industrial scale, as well as chemical processes. So if you were to apply to Cambridge, you wouldn't have to worry about that because you will be covering topics in both those disciplines. Another question, do you need further maths for chemical engineering? The answer to that one is it's recommended if you can study further maths at school, but it's not a requirement for the entry requirements for chemical engineering and biotechnology. Our requirements are maths and chemistry A level. Another question here, now the study got broader with biotechnology in it. Are you also accepting more students? Well, we are hoping to have a cohort of about 60 and 70, and we'll see how things go from there. But for now, we're aiming to have the same number of undergraduates join the course, hopefully.
I think next one's for you too, right? Specific, because you're saying it's now straight entry into chemical engineering, so there's no natural science route for entry. That's correct. It's a direct entry, and anyone applying would have to sit the natural science admissions assessment, will be starting the chemical engineering undergraduate course directly in their first year. But historically, yes, you had to do chemistry. Yeah. Yeah. And I think maths. Yeah. But you still need maths and chemistry are still a requirement for the entry now. Right. The entry requirements are A star, A star, A for chemical engineering. Let's say you don't get those exactly, but your statement is great. And okay. So if you apply, if your predicted grades are 2 A stars and an A, that's great.
If your predicted grades aren't quite that, but then you do really well in the natural science pre-admissions assessment test, you most likely would still be invited for an interview. And depending on how well you do in your interview, if the college that you've applied to take a real interest in you, they will be making you an offer, but the offer will be based on you achieving a minimum of 2 A stars and an A for your A levels. And you would need to meet that requirement to be able to then have your place confirmed at university. Okay, could you learn some bio stuff in chemical engineering in Cambridge? That's the whole idea. Yes, you definitely
Even
can.
I did.
Yeah, there's a lot of biotechnology in the course now. Another question which is posted here, is semiconductor industry a growing industry which needs chemical engineers? Companies such as Intel making the materials on circuit boards is something I find interesting and is another degree more suitable. What would you say there, Rachel, from your experience?
I think the answer is yes, but I would say maybe material science is equally suitable, because I think I would look carefully at the locations where these are being made, because I think it's predominantly China. And I think you have to ask yourself, do you want to learn Chinese and live in China? Which you might want to do, because it could be quite good fun. But I think that's the other bit, right? It's interesting intellectually. Absolutely good challenge, will change the world. Yeah. But what are the locations and the cultures where you would be able to deliver that in? Not for me.
That's a good point, actually. Thinking about what sort of geographic locations you'll end up depending on your career's interests. Very important to consider as well. What's the difference between a chemical and biochemical engineer? I am going to try and answer this, but feel free to add to it, Rachel. Fundamentally, the only difference is one is looking at a chemical process, one's looking at a biological process. However, the processes that you design fundamentally could be very, very similar. So there is differences in the terms of the application of what you make at the end, as a biochemical engineer or chemical engineer, but what you learn in the department when you do come and do your degree as an undergraduate is all the fundamental processes that could be developed with these different then applications. Would you say that's correct?
I'd say there's very little difference.
Yeah, there is very different.
Biology is chemistry.
Oh. What university degree can lead to a career? Okay, we've answered that one. What is the average GCSE grades that students need in Cambridge Chemical Engineering? Okay, so there is no entry requirements at the university based on GCSE grades. Our entry requirements are based on students achieving A-level grades, and our requirements are students achieving 3 A-level grades, which are 2 A.
You don't know the answer to that one.
Sorry?
You don't know what GCSE grades people got because we don't ask, right?
We see their grades profiles, and most of them do very well in their GCSE, but that isn't what we base our selection criteria on. So don't worry if your GCSEs aren't that strong profile. If you don't have a very strong portfolio of grades there, there's still opportunity to get a place at Cambridge, provided you do well in your A levels. Is biology A-level mandatory for applying to biotechnology? The mandatory requirement is chemistry and maths, and a third science, preferably physics, biology, or further maths. So no, it's not a mandatory requirement. If you prefer the old system, okay, can you apply to natural sciences first and then transfer to Chem Eng? I think there might still be an opportunity for doing that, but the chances of you getting a place once you transfer over may be limited, because we may have all our places taken up with students who have had a direct entry into the course. So yeah, that's something to think about. Right, I think we're kind of coming up to 2 o'clock, so I think we might need to wrap up the questions here. I can see there's many more questions posted, but I would like to request people who have still got many questions to please do direct them. I'm
sorry, I've just seen that all of these are about entry stuff, but there is one that says, do you think visiting an ice cream factory or wine factory is a good experience for chemical engineering? And the answer is yes.
Right. I mean, I think there's lots of questions here about admissions. And my advice is anyone interested in finding more out about the course, do come along and visit the department, where there'll be lots of opportunities for doing that. I'm just going to wrap up by just summarizing a couple of key things. The new undergraduate tripos, if you are thinking of applying to Cambridge for chemical engineering, is no longer chemical engineering, it's chemical engineering and biotechnology, the course. It's a direct 4-year entry course. So anyone applying this October will be applying to start their undergraduate course in the department in 2023 October. Will be directly coming to the undergraduate course in the department. You will no longer be studying engineering or natural sciences in your first year. And the other thing just to point out is that there are many events which are coming up over the summer. One is the one big event which is coming up, which is the July Open Days. I think it's on the 7th and 8th of July. Please go on the university website. There's lots of information about the Open Days. We have a number of in-person events happening in the department. There's some guided tours. There's a whole Q&A session around admissions. There's information about the undergraduate course. So please do sign up for attending one of those sessions. And we will be really looking forward to seeing some of you there and hopefully being able to answer some of your questions. All right, I think last thing I'd like to say is a huge thank you to Rachel. She has been very kind to give up her time to come and talk to us today. I'm really, really grateful for this, Rachel. It's certainly fascinating to see the sort of broad range of careers you've had. It certainly demonstrates the kind of the diversity of the discipline and the opportunities you can have once you graduate. So thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for joining the webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the invitation, Cam. Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye.